Yeah, so let me see how I do that now. I will open our video for you. Where is it? Where is it? As you can see, I maintain, even though I don't find the video I need, I maintain my calmness here because we never give up, don't we? So here we are, and I will share my screen now with you, and we will watch that video. Just 1 second. Share my video. There we are. Okay. So, hi everybody, and welcome to our second part of our conference today, of our US conference, which basically brings to an end our series of online conferences. We had basically 4 dates. This is our last one. So I will open up with a very, very interesting lady from Israel, Sarit Firon. And before I'll say good evening, I think, in Israel now, I will just mention that we're going to have a discussion now until 1. So we have a good 40 minutes, Sarit, to talk today. And I will explain in a minute why this is going to be a very interesting discussion. At 2, we'll open our AI session that is incredible because Mark Minevich is going to lead a session with some of the world's most important people in AI today, including the heads of AI at Boston Consulting Group, at Levi Strauss, at Microsoft, Nvidia, and H&M. The other day we had this, a similar panel with their peers at the World Economic Forum. And at 2, we will open our direct investing entrepreneurial families achieving alpha session with Candice Beaumont that's going to lead it. And that's going to be a very interesting session with some very interesting families. You can see it on our website. Yeah, and now we will open the session with Sarit from Israel. So first of all, good evening. Good evening, right? What's the time?
It's yeah, it's 7:20.
And how are things over there? How are we dealing with COVID in Israel so far?
Now it's much better. Months ago it was a disaster, but we are recovering. So we are in a much better situation right now.
Got it. What I would like to, we're going to talk about lots of different topics, and maybe I will let you this time introduce yourself. But what I will say is that Sarit is one of the most prominent names when it comes to technology from Israel. I believe she was involved, whether it was through M&As, direct investing companies, she was leading their exits and etc. in probably around $4 billion worth of deals and exits. You will correct me and explain before. She was in different positions in different companies in the right places, in the right times. I believe some of the companies you've dealt with, even at dire times, where you guys had to go through an IPO and right before you were ready to go ahead, everything came crashing down, which in a way like what we're seeing in COVID, and yet you managed to steer the boat to safe waters and to a successful outcome. And now, recently, I believe a year ago or so, she joined one of the groups that I think is exceptional in Israel. And by the way, it's really not me being nice to my guests. Check me on this. Team 8, the thing I liked about Team 8 and about very few other funds coming out of Israel is, first of all, they were founded by very senior people, and one of them is the head of Unit 8200 in the Israeli army, which is the secret unit that does cyber and AI, Nadav Tzafrir. We will talk about that later on. And they are just doing not only exceptional things in exceptional sectors with their, with what, and by the way, I believe the founder of Checkpoint also came from 8200, but also the fact that the way they work is very interesting, because they build, instead of investing in companies and making them grow, which they do, part of what they do is figure out what are the needs of the major companies that might buy them later on, and then build the companies to meet those issues. So, I believe they mix all of the different strategies together, but that's one of the main strategies, which is very interesting. So, I talk a lot. I want to open really up and really get, instead of reading your bio as I usually do when we speak, let you tell your life story, how you ended up doing what you do. I would say a serial company builder or a serial investor, or probably both. So
I would say both. I definitely see myself more as a company builder, but in recent years, also an investor. So since my career spanned out on about 26 years, instead of just, telling you all the things that I did, I will just choose a few highlights throughout my career, and also try to, show you how we navigated through good times, bad times, and how it led me today to become an investor that I think that brings more value to portfolio companies because of my career and the 26 years of experience. So I started about 26 years ago in the RAD group. It's one of the first groups, high-tech groups in Israel. Very soon after I became a CFO.
And what did you study just before we go there?
I'm an accountant and economy. So this was my
economy. So no technology,
yes, no technology. Technology was, maybe I would say one of the things that I really liked. I registered to university to learn physics, but then I thought it's not practical enough, and I changed it to accounting and economy. And
that in the Guide to the Galaxy, I think that when they made the spaceship that they sent from Earth to get rid of people, I think there were marketing people and accountants.
I believe so. It's not a surprise. It's not a surprise. By the way, my technology actually experience is a bit from the military service. I went through a 7-month course in electronics, but eventually I ended up as a lieutenant in the Air Force, Israeli Air Force. And this is really many years ago. But 26 years ago, as I said, I started in the high-tech industry, my first steps. And very soon after, I found myself as the CFO of one of the companies in the RAD group, taking it public in 97 on NASDAQ. This was actually an easy IPO, no crisis at the time. Actually, there was a crisis in APAC, in Asia, but it was less meaningful for RADCOM businesses. And then just before 2000, I was asked by Excel Partners to join a company by the name of PCube. It was the .com era, I remind you. And the idea was that I will take them public at a $1 billion valuation, which seems to everyone very reasonable at the time, although it was a startup of about 6 months old. And I relocated from Israel to Palo Alto in order to do the IPO. But very soon after, we realized that we were in the middle of a crisis. Fortunately enough, we weren't yet another .com company, but we had a deep technology, and we survived the crisis. And 4 years later, we sold it to Cisco for $200 million. Then fast forward a few years, I was asked again by Sequoia this time to take another company public. For this company, MediaMind, I relocated from Palo Alto to New York. Our bankers, underwriters, the lead one was Lehman Brothers, if you don't mind. So I find myself again in the middle of, a crisis, filing the S1 in March 2008, just to realize that again, we cannot carry out the IPO, and Lehman Brothers is actually disappearing on us. So since MediaMind was an excellent company, we waited 2 years and we took it public in 2010, and a year later we sold it for $500 million. At the time, it was one of the two largest exits in Israel. A few words about MediaMind, and this will eventually connect the dots to what I do today. MediaMind was a company with 450 employees. The roots started in Israel, the R&D, but then, all the go-to-market, sales, marketing, etc., was outside of Israel, most of it in the US, but we had 35 offices around the globe with, different cultures, different time zones, etc., and it was a major challenge to synchronize all of this and still create a company that is growing on a quarterly basis, is profitable every quarter since 2001, actually, besides only one quarter in 2009. And then, as I said, we sold the company, but for me, it was an eye-opener of how it makes life much easier when you are not located only in Israel, but you have the global perspective. You understand different cultures, you know how to hire people in different cultures, and you understand what it means to create a global company that is working very efficiently. Then I returned back to Israel after 10 years in the States, did another CEO position where we actually transformed the 2D camera of any device to a 3D camera by using very sophisticated algorithms. We actually had a joint venture with Aetna, the insurance company in the US, but eventually, since Cigna acquired them, they shut down the joint venture, and this actually ended the company, but it was a very, again, an experience that gave a lot of insights that later on I could use for other companies. During that time, I also made my first angel investments. The first investment was in a company called Datorama. It was back in 2012. I knew the founders from my previous company. They were a bit younger than me or less senior. I knew the problem that they are trying to solve. I knew that it's a very large problem, that the enterprises will be willing to pay a lot for it if someone will be able to solve it. And I knew that this team have the stamina and the right instincts and the star quality, I would say, to star quality for high-tech industry, not as a celebrity, of course. And I decided not only to invest in the seed round, but also I led the entire seed round. Actually, I was asked to be a mentor for the founders. But as I said, I found myself leading the seed round. was a very, very active board member. And within 6 years, we sold the company to Salesforce for $800 million. And for me, it was actually, the seed that was planted in how I would like to make investments, because I realized that in the 20 years before that, when I raised money from Sale, Insight Partners, Lightspeed, Sequoia, etc., most of the time the support that they gave us was the brand name. So when it came to hire a C-level executive in the US, it was much easier if you have a brand name amongst your investors. But on the day-to-day basis, most of the time we didn't get a lot of help. However, with Datorama, I actually went with them throughout the 6 years journey. And even though it was a very successful company, we encountered challenges and problems, I would say on a weekly basis. This is how it works in a startup. And for the founders to have someone in their team that can help them, it was there, and I was in many of the challenges they faced, I already faced in the past. And just to bring the confidence that they were looking for, or the good advice, was a very, very meaningful thing for them. The CEO always say, and I will quote him now, although I don't like to brag, he always say, we could have sold the company without Sarit to Salesforce, but not within 6 years and not for $800 million. So even if, he's trying to flatter me, I do know that along the way, I was able to prevent them from, getting into the same pitfalls that I enter in my past. So then when I met my friends at Teammate, the partners of Teammate, and one of them, Danny mentioned, is the former commander of 8200, I realized that actually we have the same vision of how investments should be done. Just one more thing in between, I led another VC before Teammate. This was a co-investment vehicle. I invested alongside the big guys, the tier one VCs like Sequoia, Boehme, Lightspeed, Accel, etc. I made 25 investments, out of which I have 11 exits. Some of them are the most prominent in Israel in recent years. Armis, that was acquired by Insight Partners for $1.1 billion. Fiverr that went public last year and is being traded at $6.4 billion right now. Tea Party that haven't been exited yet, but just raised $150 million per pre-money valuation of more than $2 billion. This is what's written in the newspaper, so I'm not quoting anything that is confidential. And many other exits. And by the way, in this portfolio, I have a few more companies that I'm sure that we will hear about in the future. But for me, it was now about creating my own fund that will be able to lead rounds, not only participate in rounds, because if I'm helping and being very hands-on a partner to the founders in the company, I might as well have a bigger chunk of the equity. And then I met Teammate, and then if it's okay, I will move to talk a little bit about Teammate and what we do. Is it okay with you, Danny?
Sure. Can you explain a little bit what is 8200 units? I mean,
yes, yes, absolutely. So 8200, you should think of it as the equivalent to the NSA. And by the way, the former NSA director, Admiral Mike Rogers, is actually 4-star admiral, is one of our senior advisors. By the way, just today, Calcalist, the largest economist newspaper in Israel, published a mutual webinar that I had with Mike today, actually. I think that his part is very interesting. And he found it's very interesting to be involved with Teammate because, first of all, it reminds him a lot of what he did in the NSA. But moreover, one of the things that he said in this interview was that he see that one of the things that are very unique in Israel is that all of us are actually growing together in the army, and therefore we are able to start companies easily because we can build teams very quickly, and teams that actually most of the time know each other from before. And this is very meaningful for the chances to succeed. Another thing about 8200, and as Danny said before, most of the things that we do there are around, of course, Israel security, most of the time, I would say defense, but also attack. This is not something that we are investing in outside of the army, and we are dealing only with defense, of course. But what they do there, it's mainly the cutting edge technologies around the cyber, data, big data, machine learning, AI, which is the, I would say, the basis of the digital transformation movement, I would almost call it. And they are the experts. The way the army choose them is that they, there is a mandatory draft in Israel. Everyone, every high school graduate has to serve in the army between 2 to 3 years. And the 8200 has the right to actually identify the most, talented and genius people, the 1%, and they take them to 8200. And these guys, when they go out of the army, many times Google and Facebook are attracting them with very high salaries. But, or on the other hand, some of them are starting companies, but many times they are doing, creating companies around very small problems or ideas. And the idea of Nadav, the former commander of 8200, was why not take these people that are actually already leaving the company, the army, and continue to create solutions for big problems like they did in the army for different purposes, but really large problems. And this is what they started doing in Teammate 7 years ago. They raised money from strategic investors like Cisco, Microsoft, Airbus, Walmart, Scotiabank, and many others, larger enterprises. Many of them are Fortune 500. And the idea was that they will learn from them what are the problems that are actually bothering them in terms of enterprise technology, security, privacy, cloud infrastructure, and everything else that relates to digital transformation. And Teammate will create companies around this, around these problems. So they did. They created 5 companies in the first Foundry Fund. They created 5 companies. Cyber companies. 2 of them already have been sold, one of them to Temasek and one of them to Cisco. So this foundry already returned about 4 or 5x to their investors. The second foundry fund was actually created about 2 years ago, and this time in order to create 8 companies also in data, big data, machine learning, AI. But this is a very new fund. Then about a year ago, we partnered with the former CEO of one of the largest banks in Israel, Rakefet Rosak, and 2 partners that are ex-founders of unicorns in Israel. One is Yuval Tal that founded Payoneer, and Ronen Asya that founded eToro. And together they are creating a fintech foundry fund that will create 6 companies in the fintech arena. What I do, I joined this group as a partner too, in order to create the venture capital. And I will invest in all the domains that Teammate have expertise in. And the idea was that we created so many assets within the Teammate platform. We have 40 company builders, whether they are technologists, marketing experts, go-to-market experts, business development experts. And we have now around our strategic investors, we actually enlarged this network to be about 200 enterprises with the C-level executives in our network, CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, CEOs. And the idea was that if we have all these assets within the platform, we can serve much more than just building 1 or 2 companies a year. So the combination between Teammate and myself actually created a fund that can provide 360 degrees of support to each company. So Teammate will bring the technology and go to market. I'm bringing my operational expertise and investment expertise. And together we are building a fund, which is, again, I bring you back to that around my fund that really can provide value to the founders and not just money.
And you have this talent to join new ventures right before a crisis. Which is great for the companies, right? They get you in the right time to get them out of it. But I guess we should ask, understanding more what you do, but how COVID affects what's going on. Because on one hand, some companies enjoy what comes with the COVID, but most don't, and they are more in stress and need more capital or whatever. So what do? You just support more and more, and you need to put more money to keep them alive. And by the way, people are saying those that will survive this storm will be way stronger and with less competition. And on the other hand, I would have thought that there are opportunities in the market because because of that, companies are more stressed. Companies need money. They'll be way more flexible. Valuations will go down, and you as a fund might find just simply better opportunities. So basically, my question is, and how COVID affects all of you guys?
Yeah. So in different ways, but I think that mainly if I look at the area or the domains that I invest in, COVID to some extent was more accelerator factor rather than a disruptive factor. Because think of it, I'll give you an example that will demonstrate it maybe better. I talked to the CIO of one of the largest bank in the world, and it was about, I think, April. And he told me that they had a plan to migrate all the call centers to the cloud to work remotely and digitally. And the plan was supposed to take 3 years. And because of the COVID and what happened, they had to expedite it, and they completed it within 6 weeks only. So this actually drove them to form a task force that had to analyze all the other projects of digital transformation in order to expedite them as well. Think of a startup that sells to this enterprise, sells to this bank. It becomes what they achieved in 5 years, now they can achieve in 5 months. So for us, in many ways, it was an accelerator, and I'll give you an example for one of our portfolio company. So I invested in a Silicon Valley-based company in October last year. It was a company that helps to improve the sales people productivity. And of course, coming, the COVID, we wanted to be very cautious. So we asked the company to extend the runway, to cut expenses a little bit, to stop hiring new people, etc. But then 2-3 months into the crisis, we realized that actually we're experiencing a boost in our business. And the fact was that the big enterprises that were actually our customers realized that SetSale is actually enabling them to work with their salespeople remotely, more efficiently, without the need to see them or to meet them in the office. So not only that this drove them to buy more, but we also went through a POC with Cisco that was supposed to take a year at least for such a big organization that is testing a very young startup product. And we won the POC, and we got a very large, very, very large, it was a game changer for the company. And now we're in the process of raising a round for this company, which is a significant up round for the company. So here, we are in the middle of the crisis, in the middle of COVID, but for this company, it actually played to the benefit. The other thing, just think of, all these companies that now needs to deal with, working from remotely, etc. This increases the surface of cyber attacks. There are more issues of privacy. So for companies that are dealing with these problems, it's actually, again, it's accelerator and not a problem. I don't want to sound as if everything is great and, the crisis is not impacting anyone. It's not true. Because if you think some of the big enterprises that are actually the clients of all the startups, some of them had to cut expenses because of the COVID actually impacted their business. So there is also this negative effect, but I can say that all my portfolio companies are currently benefiting from it. The other thing that I would say, I do see some reduction in valuation compared to the period before the COVID, but the good startups with the AAA teams, valuations are very similar. It's not about valuation, it's about being able to pick the right company, give them the right runway, so they are able to leverage everything that is going on, and not about optimizing valuation. This is not the game with the excellent companies.
And regardless of the fact that your peers at the teammate build companies from scratch, when you invest in your fund, which stages, which sectors, and And is it only Israeli companies or not necessarily?
So I invest in seed A and B, mainly seed and A, but when it comes to seed, it will be usually either second timers or companies that we see already some market traction. I invest in all the domains that Teammate has expertise in. So it means cyber, enterprise software, cloud infrastructure, and fintech. I invest in companies that are either Israeli or related to Israel because this is where we bring more value. But the two first investments are, one of them is a Silicon Valley-based company, and the other one is New York-based company. The other four that I invested in are located in Israel with offices outside of Israel. But eventually, all the Israeli companies become, foreign companies because there is no market in Israel. So they usually keep their R&D facilities in Israel, and all the rest is built outside of Israel. And this is also, by the way, where we bring the expertise. My experience from, always working with the companies that are global companies, and also Teammate that built an office in New York, and now we are building also an office in San Francisco, with the idea that we will be able to help companies with the go-to-market needs on the ground, with hiring needs on the ground, and really support them in the transition from Israel outside of Israel.
And you provide your companies with great access to the market. What about to Silicon Valley, New York VCs, and all of that ecosystem?
So I cannot reveal too much. Some of it is confidential, but one of the term sheets that we got is from a really tier one VC that we know very well. Also, I already collaborated with Wing Capital twice. Wing Capital was created or founded by Peter Wagner. He's a legendary investor that was 14 years, I think, managing partner in Excel. So the first company, SetSail, is a company that he actually brought to me. And my last investment in a company called Classic, it's a software for quantum, I brought to him and he liked it and he decided to invest with me. So I think that people or VCs regard Teammate very highly, and they are looking to do business with us because they think that they appreciate the fact that we have such a network of enterprises, and also the expertise of company building, which are less common in other VCs. Usually most of the VCs have professional investors, and they see Teammate as a very unique VC in this sense, and they think that we can bring another perspective and another angle to their companies. So this is why they like to collaborate with us. Interesting.
And so you joined Teammate and in your part of the business, you don't build the companies ground up, or do you? I believe you invest.
No, so I invest in companies, but since my passion is to build companies and working very closely with all the CEOs and the founding teams that I invested in, and I definitely feel part of their company building. Although I don't do it in the same capacity that I did it in the past. But this is definitely one of the things that I bring uniquely to the table.
And what about, what kind of companies would you be looking at? No, actually, that's not the question I wanted to ask. Maybe I'll ask something different. The fund. What are the goals? How much capital are you guys seeking to raise, and how much do you invest in a company? So I guess it changes, but
yes, I cannot comment a lot about the size of the fund because we are under some kind of restrictions in the US, and only when completed we will be able to say things about it. But in average, we are looking at investing in about 14 companies. And the initial check will be on average $5 million, and we'll keep enough reserve for every company so we will be able to participate in the follow-on investments. So far we made 6 investments, so about additional 8-9 investments to go.
And did you at Teammate feel like, not only in your fund but in general all across, that you needed to actually support, let's say, unexpectedly some companies due to what's going on right now, and it took you by surprise, or?
No, but I think that we were lucky. I think that we either invested in some companies were early stage that are mainly, concentrating now in the R&D phase, so they are not impacted by the COVID, and some that actually already selling impacted it positively. And I'll give you another example. Plank is a company that develops an AI-based platform for insurance companies. So when I met them it was about February this year, they had 4 out of the top insurance companies that they customers. And during the COVID, they signed the 5th one, and now also one of the largest insurance companies in Japan. So again, it depends. I think that since enterprises now are going through a massive digital transformation processes, it created many opportunities to my portfolio companies. So currently we are not being impacted negatively from the situation. Hopefully it will stay like this. I think that we were lucky, not only smart, I must say, but currently the impact is mainly positive. So we didn't need to help anyone, but the opposite. Most of the conversations that we have, where after, in March, we ask everyone to be more cautious. Now we are telling everyone you can let go, grab the opportunities, invest more, because there are a lot of business outside.
And maybe the last question I'll ask you before we go to our amazing AI session with really some of the world's leading names. What do you see going forward? I mean, which sectors do you think are going to enjoy growth, rapid growth? How do you see from your perspective? I guess healthcare, obviously.
Absolutely, healthcare.
Became very serious. But which other segments?
First of all, everything to do with big data, machine learning, AI. So it's enterprise software, enterprise technology, cloud infrastructure for sure. This will, I think that this domain will experience a massive growth. Cybersecurity, again, for sure, because as I said, the surface of the attack is growing very fast because of moving remotely, etc. Fintech is one of the domains that are being impacted very positively from the situation, again, because of the digital transformation, having having to provide solution for remote work, and also, helping people that are less fortunate, and the big banks are not looking at them the same way that fintech companies. And this is not because the big banks are smarter, but because the big banks are not able to use big data and AI in order to understand who is a good customer and who is not a good customer. This is something that technology-based companies are able to understand, and therefore are able to offer products and solutions for these segments. So this is definitely one of the sectors that will grow very fast soon.
And maybe last question. I mean, it's a personal question on how much do you think will actually stick, in the sense of, like you say, we all moved online. It forced us to understand Zoom better, to order online, to understand how amazing it is to have Amazon ship to your house, basically everything, and that you can return it the next day also. But seriously, and you see the, how the markets react. I mean, immediately when they talk about a vaccine that we all knew was coming, Zoom goes down 30%, right?
Yeah.
The hell with it. So I personally would have thought that some of it would stick, right? I mean, because we learned how to use Zoom. We hate it, right? I mean, Zoom fatigue and everything. We want to meet people in person. We don't want to order everything online. We want to go to the supermarket myself and choose between 25 different kinds of Häagen-Dazs and see them in front of me when I buy my ice cream for my weekend. But on the other hand, it pushed us, whether we liked it or not, to get familiar with stuff. So how do you see that? Do you think we will go back to normal like we were before?
No,
or in between, or what?
It will be in between. I think that we will see a hybrid working habits everywhere. So even, us teammates, we think of it as, going back to work from the office 2-3 days a week and then working from home. We are working on improving the infrastructure so everyone have the right size screens and good chairs to sit on, etc. But we realize that the Zoom or working remotely has a very positive impact, but it has a limit. So if you lose completely the connections between people, in the beginning, I think that everyone experienced growth in the efficiency, but then there's some deterioration. I think that the mix will be great, because if you don't need to go on the traffic every day 2 hours, it saves a lot of time. But if you see and interact with your colleagues and customers 2 days a week, you don't lose the connections that is so important for innovation and for teamwork, etc. So I think that all organizations will find the middle way. Yeah. And I don't see any organization go back completely to working 5 days a week from the office. It doesn't make sense. I think that all of us realize that it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Other good ways to waste our time, not 2 hours in the traffic every day.
I don't know about all of you. Those of us with 5 kids like myself are very flexible about the idea of going back to work 6 days a week. But what I will tell you is, as a good host, I will connect all the dots here nicely. And I will say that you are also involved at our very exciting UAE event we're working on, as is Mark, that will be leading the next session, because we feel it's an historical moment in history where an entire region of extremely nice people and smart and educated and interesting and investors are going to be working with their peers that are also very nice people in Israel. We think it's a huge opportunity for great people to get together. So Mark will be leading the efforts in the AI at that conference. So as you are, and we will get updates on that. Taking over and leading our exciting AI session with, again, some of the biggest names out there. By the way, I do wear Levi Strauss as we speak, just so you know. You don't see that. That's the beauty of Zoom, because you have no idea that what's beneath me is just jeans. And if you don't believe me, I will show you that, okay? Okay, that's just what I'm wearing. And that's the only thing that's beautiful about Zoom. You can fool people. I just ruined it and showed you that I wear Levi Strauss. Mark Minovich, I'm very, very fortunate to know him. For many years, he's been building some of our most exceptional panels with the top names in the world of AI. He's a chair and co-founder of Digital Pioneers Network and president of Going Global Ventures. And I don't know anyone more prominent in the AI world than Mark. Sarit, you definitely should know Mark later on down the road. Mark, you will introduce your panel and take it from here. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Danny. This is an exciting time for all of us, an exciting time for DC Finance. We're glad to be here. I'm passing it on to my colleagues who are going to introduce this exciting panel that we're putting together. Angelina, who is in our studio, Digital Pioneers Network Telegraph Studio, and Angelica in our studio in the United States, and we're going to take it forward. We are waiting for, I believe we have the 4 panelists. We're waiting for one more. And if he does join us, then we should be fine. I see Tom already is there. So we're all set. And Angelina, we're on to you to begin this panel. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mark, this is Keith. My video is locked. So
okay.
Same here. This is
yeah, please unlock again. Please unlock the video, please, for all the participants if you can. Danny, please unlock the videos for everybody.
Yeah. Let's see. Who are we missing?
We have everybody. We have Tom. We have Sylvain. We have Keith, and we have Alan on. I see his video. I see Katia, but we need to unlock the video for Tom and for Keith. And please.
Yeah, I did that, but for some. Oh, is Tom joining us? Because I just did.
Tom is there. Tom is there.
It says my video is still locked.
Same for me.
This is mine. This is Tom.
Let me see here.
Okay, so just to make sure that we have the videos on from everybody, otherwise we could do it, but it's not as fun.
Yeah. I did unlock it here. It says that I asked Tom to start the video, but for some reason
And when I select that and then I click the little video icon to do that, it's not allowing me to. It just remains in locked position.
What? Maybe I'll hang up and rejoin. Maybe there's an issue there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Please do that. Just hang up and rejoin.
Okay, let me try one more time. Otherwise, I will do the same.
It should work.
Sylvain joined us.
Okay, Sylvain is on.
I disconnected and reconnected. You might try that.
Okay. All right. So we have Sylvain. Sylvain, good to see you. Okay, good to see you there. Hello. Hello, Paris.
Mark.
Hello
everyone.
from somewhere in the middle of New Jersey. And I see Keith. Keith, hi. And see Katia from San Francisco area. We're just waiting for Tom. Tom, any luck? Okay, Tom is appearing and reappearing, and technology again. Blame it all on Zoom. Danny, you have the right. I have the CTO. CTO used to work at a company called BlackRock, actually Blackstone, and now the CTO is at Zoom. So I could give you a personal number. You could write all your grievances there. Okay. Okay, so we are just, let me see. Okay, we're all set. We're just waiting for Tom, I believe, from our side.
I will try to send him another invite and make it work.
Okay.
Okay, so you guys maybe start and I'll
Okay, I think let's start. Just in the interest of time, as Tom joins, please help us. And we begin from our side. Angelina, take over.
Like to ask everyone if you hear me clearly because I think we're on mute. So if
we can hear you very well.
Okay, perfect.
We could all hear you. Go ahead,
I'm putting
Angelina.
myself on mute now. Thank you.
Perfect.
We're all on mute.
Yes, okay. Once more, we would like to welcome everyone. Digital Pioneers is proud to do a technology panel as a part of DC Finance US Family Office event, as Mark mentioned already. And as you already know, DC Finance is an international network of high net worth individuals, family offices, and investors supporting over 2,000 families who represent over $500 billion of assets, as well as the largest institutional investors who manage $1 trillion worth of assets. As for our own Digital Pioneers Network, Digital Pioneers Network is a digital transformation media platform and think tank of leading artificial intelligence thought leaders, innovators, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and world-renowned experts. The contributions of these individuals plays a critical role to the acceleration of the going global transformations and the reinvention of the digital economy as the elevation of humanity. Digital Pioneers Network is collaborating with Telegraph, a leading media production European group from which studio I'm currently joining this event from. And today we have an intimate panel with great leaders and experts. Some of our participants are Mr. Sylvain Duranton, who is the managing director and senior partner of Boston Consulting Group. Hi. Then we also have Mr. Tom Lawry, who is a national director of AI, health, and life sciences at Microsoft. Our familiar digital pioneers face is Ms. Katia Walsh, who is the chief strategy and AI officer at Levi Strauss, followed by Mr. Keith Strier, who is the Vice President Worldwide AI Initiatives at Nvidia. And last, but certainly not the least, we have Mr. Alan Boymi, who is joining us today as well, and he's the Chief Technology Officer of H&M Group. Before we go to my colleague Angelica, who will briefly touch upon the biographies of each of our today's participants, I'd like also to share a few words about Digital Pioneers Network Executive Chairman and co-founder Mark Minovich, who will be leading and co-hosting today's dialogue with Angelica and I. Mark is a digital cognitive strategist, artificial intelligence expert, venture capitalist, and the principal founder and president of Going Global Ventures. He was recently appointed as chair of AI policy at the International Research Center of AI under the auspice of UNESCO. Mark collaborates and advises large global enterprises both in the US and Japan. Currently, he serves as a strategic advisor and global ambassador to the CEO and chairman of New York-based IPsoft Inc., and advisor to BCG. Mark also holds the role of senior fellow as part of the US Council of Competitiveness in Washington, D.C., and he is an appointed member of G20 and B20's Digital Task Force. With all this in mind, I will pass the mic to my colleague, Angelica, who will continue this dialogue.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Angelina, for the introduction, and now an intro on my end. So, of course, welcome all to this panel discussion that will, among other things, discuss the following topics: the state of AI in the world and enterprises, adoption, new thinking and new actions, accelerating adoption of AI at the age of the pandemic, designing resilient human capital through lifetime learning, collaboration with humans and digital agents, and next generation of solutions and use cases that are powered by AI. And with this in mind, Angelina went over everybody who's joining us today, and I would like to now expand on some biographies so everybody can get more acquainted with the distinguished panelists who are joining us. So, of course, we have Mr. Sylvain Duranton. He's the managing director, senior partner of BCG and global leader of BCG Gamma, which is a business unit that is dedicated to data science and advanced analytics applied to business. He manages a team of over 850 data scientists and provides support to businesses in the fields of AI for companies across the world. And Sylvain advocates for a human plus AI approach, using AI systems alongside humans, not instead of them, and shares the specific formula companies can adopt to successfully employ AI while keeping humans in the loop. So welcome, Sylvain. We now also have Ms. Katia Walsh, who leads strategy, data analytics, and artificial intelligence at Levi, Strauss & Company. She focuses on setting the company's holistic digital and corporate strategy and infusing it with data, analytic, and artificial intelligence capabilities to drive business value across the company. Globally, the impact ranges from innovation incubation to strategic growth initiatives, new business models, and new ways of working. Katia has more than 20 years of cross-industry experience, combining strategy, data analytics, and machine learning, and a track record of making global brands indispensable to their consumers through these capabilities. So welcome, Katia. We also have Mr. Tom Lawry, who joins us, and he serves as National Director of AI for Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft, and previously served as Director of Worldwide Health. Tom also works with providers, payers, and life science organizations in planning and implementing innovative analytical solutions that improve the quality and efficiency of health services delivered around the globe. Tom also focuses on strategies for digital transformation applied to performance optimization, including artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cognitive services. He previously served as Director of Organizational Performance for Microsoft's health incubator, the Health Solutions Group. Welcome, Tom. We now have also Mr. Keith Strier, who is the Vice President of World AI Initiatives at Nvidia, where he leads an initiative called AI Nations, a worldwide program that helps government leaders and stakeholders develop plans to implement AI to advance national priorities to drive economic growth. Keith works with senior leaders across public and private sectors and in all markets to help them understand the new art of the possible when AI, GPU accelerated computing, and autonomous machines and IoT are deployed at scale. Welcome, Keith. And we also have Mr. Alan Boymi, who's the CTO of H&M Group. Alan has extensive international and domestic experience in executive leadership as a CIO, CTO, Global Innovation Executive, and various consulting roles. He's a recognized authority and frequent speaker on the strategic application of information technology to drive revenue growth, service quality, improve production, and cost controls. He has also proven ability to envision and orchestrate innovative corporate projects requiring high-performance teams, complex business analysis, and timely results. He is equally adept at approaching, integrating, and solving problems from a business or technology perspective, currently serving, as we stated before, as CTO at H&M Group. So again, welcome all, and now I would like to pass the panel on to my colleague and fellow co-founder of the Digital Pioneers Network, Mark Minovich, to facilitate the discussion on AI applications. So Mark, on to you.
Thank you very much, and Angelica, my co-host of the Digital Pioneers Network, and Angelina, co-host from Telegraph. Thank you very much, Danny, and the DC Finance Organization. We're excited to have such distinguished panelists and speakers here today to talk about, as Danny mentioned, an important concept, and not only a concept, adoption of AI in helping our world in the most complex times. And before I get to questions that our investors would be looking for from our panel, I would like to set the stage and say to you the following. COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted the market. Investors, please realize this, with implications for AI which are unfolding right now today in November of 2020. The former Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, recently said the following: "We aren't what we are in 1950s and 1960s and 1970s. In those days, technology of consecutives for protecting our people, American people, and all technology of any consequence of all came from the United States and came from within the walls of government. Those days are irreversibly lost." This is what the former Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, said. And I will tell you today, investors, I disagree with this premise completely. The AI market is reaching $126 billion in the annual worldwide revenue by 2025. We're entering the algorithmic economy most likely at the $4 trillion of value. Where AI deployments have grown substantially year to year with no signs of slowing. And now I'm addressing specifically members of the investment community and family offices. At the end of 2019, the United States of America is the world's largest investment market for privately held AI companies, including startups, as well as large companies that aren't traded on stock exchanges. The estimate that we have is AI companies have attracted $40 billion globally in disclosed investments. We don't know the undisclosed in 2019 alone. American companies attracted the lion's share of that investment, $25 billion in disclosed value. For those of you in finance, that's 64% of the global total across 1,412 transactions. Around the world, where we have panelists represented around the world, the private market AI investment continues to grow and continued to grow from 2015 to 2019. Notwithstanding occasional claims coming from the media that China is outstripping the United States investments in AI, Chinese investments in fact leveled off, lagging the United States. In fact, we're seeing this dramatic change in China from 2015 to 2017, and things are very different today. And with this in mind, I would like to now go directly to the questions, and I want to start the questions right now with the very dear friend, Alan Boehme, who is the extraordinary, legendary Chief Technology Officer of H&M. And I want to ask a question to Alan. And we want to keep the answers very brief so we could get to as many questions as possible. But Alan, you recently mentioned that due to the digital surge, the industry has noticed that consumer behavior is evolving faster than firms could keep up. How is the AI changing the face of the customer experience? With all of what's going on right now, how will the new customer experience look like with AI and digitalization? I think you're on mute, Alan.
There we go. Thank you, Mark. I think what we're seeing is that we're moving from an age where it was very much linear in approaches, where there was guided approaches, guided selling, guided activities for customers and consumers. And things are becoming much more random, and they're becoming much more experiential. So it takes AI, it takes new algorithmic approaches to be able to predict these new behaviors. And I think these behaviors are going to continue to expand, continue to evolve as people are adjusting to what the new world looks like with the advent of COVID and post-COVID.
Thank you, Alan. And we now want to go to another good colleague of ours, really extraordinary woman, a global strategy and AI officer from the executive leadership team of Levi Strauss, right in the same neck of the woods where Alan is, and in the fashion and apparel industry. Katia, you are responsible for strategy and AI at Levi Strauss, a major global apparel brand. What do AI and lifestyle have in common?
Thank you, Mark. And it's actually an irony that I'm in fashion. I consider myself a nerd, but I'm a very proud fan of Levi's since early age. So AI is everywhere. And of course, it's part of our lifestyle. It's part of what we wear as well. And when I look at the applications of technology and AI, they really have to start with what's right for the consumer and the customer. At companies like Levi's and others, we've used artificial intelligence to really deepen the loyalty of our consumer base. We actually call our consumers fans. So that's a great application of that. We are also living in a time when anything that can be automated should be automated. We are able to optimize everything from pricing and promotions to how we do business. But most importantly, we live in a time where we can use digital technologies and AI to overhaul our business completely. So in the case of apparel and retail, we're actually able now to first sell and then manufacture, which completely changes the old paradigm of you manufacture and then you sell. We are now in a different time. At Levi's, we have a future finish laser technology that incorporates very powerful neural networks to help us with personalization, but also to create more sustainable ways in which we create our unique offerings for consumers. So these are just some examples of how lifestyle and apparel and AI intersect and are now really interconnected.
Katia, thank you very much for this intervention. We'd like to now go halfway around the world, well, at least in the beautiful city of Paris or near Paris. Our good colleague and friend, Sylvain Duranton, Senior Partner and Managing Director of Boston Consulting Group and the Global Leader of BCG Gamma. Sylvain, you have warned that AI has been going against the grain of innovation. You see how too many corporate executives behaving like bureaucrats from the past. They want to take costly, old-fashioned humans out of the loop and rely upon AI to take decisions. For the last 10 years, many companies have been trying to become less bureaucratic, have fewer central roles and procedures. AI is bringing this cool technology that might possibly make them more or less bureaucratic than ever. How do we create a healthy balance in the post-COVID-19 world with everything that you have seen and the work that you have done globally?
Thank you, Mark, for inviting me. Thank you all for having me here, and thank you for the question. Yes, I know it's a bit controversial to, say AI might bring bureaucracy, but basically, AI is deciding upon rules, many rules, but just rules. And when you decide upon rules, you forget about context. And then forgetting about context, you can do big blunders. So people who rely solely on AI for decision-making, I think, take the risk of being out of context. And we saw that a lot in the COVID crisis, where, because it was COVID, we saw some inventories piling up in some situations, some companies unable to face increasing demand for certain products, and so on and so on. And AI has been accused of creating those problems. And I think it's not AI, it's the way AI is deployed. And to avoid bureaucracy, my perspective is, we should not just think about AI like a way to, automate some part of the job and reduce the workforce, but we should think in terms of how can we create new businesses, new services, and how can we take more effective decision-making. And I think the example that was just given on Levi's and the personalizing is a very good example of something which is not bureaucratic. It's new, it's responding to customer demand. In beauty, you can see the use of, virtual reality for people who can try makeups and personalized makeups and see what sort of makeup would make sense on their personal face, and they have AI support to do that. This is true innovation. This is, better decision-making that you can have in the world of health, for instance, where AI can support decision-making on cancer treatment and other disease. And to me, that's the future of AI, not pure bureaucracy. And in the COVID environment, with lots of uncertainty everywhere, lots of volatility, context is changing rapidly, and being able, to take context into account and to keep humans in the loop to make sure that, AI stays in sync with the context is super important for me.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. And now we go from your broad perspective, we go to Keith Strier, Vice President Worldwide, lead the head of AI initiatives at Nvidia, and of course, extraordinary work and transformation, Keith, that you have done for companies like Ernst & Young and others, transforming the companies and enterprises and governments for years. The quote, I'm sticking to the quote, I love that quote. The quote was same architecture, same vision, scaling from billion-dollar data centers down to a delivery drone bringing you a pizza. It summarizes a lot of the stuff that NVIDIA is working on, the NVIDIA's vision. Can you share with us about democratization of AI infrastructure from NVIDIA perspective, and what does it mean for the investors?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and really great to be on this esteemed panel. I joined NVIDIA 14 months ago, and I think like most people who've not been in the sort of the hardware infrastructure side, I didn't think about it very much, frankly. I just assumed it was always there. Whether it's in your data center or it's on your laptop or it's in the cloud, there is sort of this general dismissal of concern over infrastructure. If you need it, you go get it, And I think one of the things that I've drank the Kool-Aid on, and now I see firsthand every day in my job, is that AI is not the same as IT. IT has been pretty well worked out. I mean, we know what classical computing requires, and the cloud service provider has done an incredible job of scaling that, and blasting through barriers for adoption on all sorts of levels. But artificial intelligence requires a specialized stack, a specialized computing stack of hardware and software that is not the same as traditional computing. And that stack is also, there isn't just one stack, there's many, many different configurations of that stack, depending on the kind of AI you're dealing with and the context and the solution the problem you're trying to solve. So what I've come to appreciate is that stack is also very expensive, and getting that stack to be widely available. So there's the access part, is one part, making it less expensive is another, and then making it easy to consume is another. So our sort of three-part commitment to democratization of AI, the infrastructure that makes AI possible, is putting it everywhere, from all the public clouds to all the OEM providers to all the, to that kind of thing. So whether you like Dell or HP or Amazon or Microsoft, you can access our technology. You want to drive the cost down, and you want to drive the performance up. And we've blown way past Moore's law at this point. Right, so there's that trajectory of innovation, and then of course you want to make it easy to consume, because you don't want to have just an elite number of researchers at top universities using it. You want to have people everywhere, including entrepreneurs and so forth, to support innovation. So those are the different things we're doing, and frankly, that is part of the secret sort of formula behind this modern era of AI, is that democratization of that access, and obviously more than Nvidia, a lot of companies have played a role, but that's one of the ways we've contributed to that.
Thank you very much, Keith, for all you do in this important area of infrastructure. And investors realize that without infrastructure, we cannot deploy so many sophisticated solutions in the United States and across the world, and to make AI as a leader in everything that the governments or businesses do. And I want to now go to Tom Lawry, who comes from a great company of Microsoft and its distinguished leader, President Mr. Satya, and all that you and the leadership of Microsoft have done to promote artificial intelligence and promote the force for good, AI for good. Every single time, Tom, I go to AI for Good or UN conferences, Microsoft is there, obviously feeling very strong and very positive in terms of its Microsoft strategy and the strategy for the world. Microsoft recently announced a new healthcare initiative known as AI for Health, a program worth over $40 million or more. AI for Health evolved out of AI for Good program, which I mentioned, which offers general aid for less fortunate around the world. How is Microsoft committed on social innovation, and especially in healthcare AI? And I understand Microsoft is committed on doing reliable screening for disease detection, diabetic retinopathy, helping people that alleviate blindness if that is not treated in time. Can you share with us all of this work and maybe give us some other examples of where Microsoft is playing?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great question, great set of questions, Mark. So what I'd say is I start with the global analytical firm Frost & Sullivan just named Microsoft #1 for AI in health. So we've got the technical chops. It's being used around the world to do many good things. Beyond our technical and AI prowess, we are very committed to basically saying AI will be a force for good for all or for some. And a lot of that is in how we all look at it, how we all work to apply it for some of the world's biggest problems. So you mentioned we have a program called AI for Good. This is a program where we're giving millions of dollars away to others who are creative, universities, anyone who has a creative idea to use AI as a force for good. So we're giving grants for things like we've done a massive number of grants for COVID research. We've done lots of grants for improving education, healthcare, the environment. But it's our commitment to say we have to not only produce good technology, we have to help make sure it's living and breathing in a world to make it better. Second, and I think of extreme importance, is we have something called the Office of Responsible AI. We have a number of things that we're doing and also seeing where AI is not necessarily neutral going out in the world. So my role in healthcare, we're seeing a lot of the inequities, a lot of the biases in the real world starting to cross over to the digital world through the use of things like algorithms that have not been properly stress tested for things like bias or transparency. So we have a huge commitment to everything from AI for Good, responsible AI, down to and including a number of principles for data and AI that we champion not only within our company, but around the world.
Thank you, Tom, for all this work and leadership that Microsoft is doing, especially on responsible AI. We had great conversations, Angelica and I, with some of your leaders in the ethics and responsible AI a few months ago. I want to now go back to Alan and ask Alan additional question regarding use cases that would be of interest to our investment community from the United States that is gathered here today. That Danny and his team has been able to pull and is being streamed in different places in family offices. And I want to ask a question specifically on the most interesting AI use cases, Alan, that you have seen, not only in your current company, but in Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble and other places where you were, the use cases that are in B2B and B2C, in the consumer retail space or other spaces. What are some of those cases? You mentioned, I've seen some of your talks where you mentioned analytics for consumer decision is one of the major use cases for the retail industry. And maybe you could discuss this and some other cases. Alan, to you. I think it's on mute.
I keep doing that. Sorry about that. I think there's a whole variety of different areas. I think previously with some of my previous companies, what we saw was the movement from recommendation engines to advisory services, and whether it's about skincare, whether it's about hair, whether it's about oral care, but we really are on the we're implementing and continue to see implementation of technology to assist with advising about your life, your health, and other things, your children. And that, I think, is part of consumer goods responsibility as well. We have the traditional use cases that we've seen, which gets into media planning, media buying, and things that allow you to optimize activities that go on. And those will continue to go on, as well as the continued use to improve manufacturing and supply chain. I think with H&M, one of our big foundations is about sustainability, is about circularity. And I believe there's a lot of opportunities to apply artificial intelligence into making this a better planet, where we can contribute the amount of water that we're using to grow our materials, or grow plants that turn into materials, the ability to do better jobs of recycling. So, and those are all things that are very important to the company. And I can see a movement in that way, and certainly an ability to apply there. There will always be the traditional places where you in the technology perspective, where you improve operations. There's always going to be opportunities in sales and marketing. But I think there are some bigger uses for it in the corporations, and certain companies will stand up and take advantage of that.
Thank you, Alan. This was great. And I want to continue with the same flow. And the question would be similar one to Katia. Katia, what can you share with our audience about use cases and experiences with AI that you feel would be relevant for the investment and family office community?
Well, I happen to have a financial services background, so I'm happy to share some examples, not necessarily from an investment perspective, but a few years ago, I helped launch a whole new way of doing business at Prudential Financial and approaching the consumer experience. Prudential Financial, for those of you who may not know it, it was at the time a 140-year-old company. The rock was literally its logo. Nobody who thought technology and innovation would think Prudential Financial. They would think stability and solids and security and protecting family and lives, etc. Our challenge was to take 5 very disparate siloed business units and create one single predictive and proactive and personalized consumer experience. And we use machine learning to completely streamline and transform the way in which life insurance was sold and bought in the United States. Before we used machine learning, there were mountains of paperwork as big as the old telephone books. It was a very invasive process. There would be a nurse who'd have to come to your home to draw blood. It would take on average 10 weeks, so more than 2 months. Through the use of machine learning, we were able to streamline down to the very key few questions that were really predictive of someone's longevity, which is what you're looking to do with life insurance. and then able to underwrite a policy. And only in very few cases would you need any more work and data. So that work, and it was really through the application of more data than ever before and the application of machine learning, we were able to take that process that used to take more than 2 months to 2 days in a very comprehensive but fast and seamless process for consumers. So today, when you go to the Prudential Financial site, you would just be asked for what you need and directed without any wandering to the right provider and the right unit. Compare that to more than 400 websites in the past and the experience that I just noted. This is just one example of what AI can do, but it's a very powerful capability. So what I really liked about what Tom said was the use of responsible and ethical leadership and the application of code of conduct, because this is very powerful. We need to make sure that we use it with the respect it deserves.
Thank you very much, Katia. I know Prudential Financial very well in Roseland and Newark, New Jersey. Actually, a good colleague of mine lives not far from where I am, from Prudential. Great company and great effort that you have made, one of the most successful insurance companies. And with this in mind, I'll go to Solveig to continue the discussion, whether we're touching on retail or fashion or many of the industries. AI adoption is, people talk about AI adoption in the boards, CEO suite, the chief digital officers, everybody's talking about. But your research, the research that came out of BCG with MIT Sloan in the latest report, if you haven't read it, please read this interesting report. It says only 10% of the companies report significant financial benefit from the AI technology's implementation, not from the AI products, but implementation and execution. What is the way of the future then? If only 10% of the companies report significant financial benefit, how do we secure value from AI? Can you maybe expand a little bit on organizational learning approach that you spoke about as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. So yes, we were quite stunned by this number. You have roughly 20% of companies who make some money, and 10% only who make real big money when deploying AI. And this is on a sample of more than 2,000 companies across sectors around the world. What does it take to succeed? I would say, those champions, those making real money, they've ticked all the boxes. So they've assembled, teams of data scientists, of digital talent. They have worked on the infrastructure. They've built techno stack. They've identified the right use cases. They've started to deploy use cases. But what makes the real jump from making some sort of money to real big money is when you start becoming this type of learning organization. And what do you learn? You learn how to combine AI with humans to make the best out of the two, and not just, out of one. And one critical thing is how to manage the interaction with AI. And we codified through the survey 5 ways to interact. You have situations where AI does decide and implements, like there was lots of discussion on pricing or personalization engines. In this situation, those engines, they would send zillions and zillions of personalized mails or offers or whatever. And the human interaction is about steering, making sure we don't have bias, as mentioned a bit earlier, making sure that the overall objective is met and some sort of adjustment and improvement of the process. But AI is pretty much doing things alone. We have situations where AI sorts of decides and human implements. And we saw that a lot in factories, for instance, in predictive maintenance. AI would say that piece is going to fail in the next 3 days. And then the scheduling and the organization and the decision on who, when, how the intervention, the physical intervention will be done is done by humans. Then you have situation where AI would give recommendations and then humans would vet. And that's something which happens a lot, for instance, in the medical sector, where AI can have some strong recommendation for one treatment, but some physicians and doctors are kept into the loop to make sure that this makes sense given the specific condition and context of a given patient to decide really on what the treatment would be. Then you have situation where AI gives insights, and then someone has to take a decision. For instance, in banks, when people work on solvency risk or who might go bankrupt, for instance, AI can spot some certain accounts, certain companies who might be going through difficult situation based on the analysis of external data, But then you have account managers and credit teams who go through real analysis based on that insight to see what decision to take. And you even have situations where humans are pushing solutions and AI is vetting. And one example would be in manufacturing, when you want to optimize manufacturing lines, for instance, the combinatorics is so high that AI and optimization cannot really solve the problem. But engineers from the line, industrial engineers, have ideas on how to change the setup in a given factory. And then their solutions are tested through simulation with AI tools. And what you see in successful companies is that successful companies manage on a wide scope of interaction, and they touch upon those 5 types of interaction. They know how to codify them. They are very aware of the type of interaction they're building, and they make sure that the knowledge is codified and accumulated over time. That's what we call learning organization, and that's the unlock of this interaction between AI and human is where the big value, the big value lies, basically.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. It's absolutely everybody that we speak to on podcast and video, everybody talks about this lifetime learning, this organizational learning approach. And now, as you are converging this learning approach with humans and machines, this becomes a necessity. So what a very strong point for everybody to understand from the family offices and investment communities. And now we go to Keith, the question regarding, we haven't touched upon governments, but now maybe is the right time to go and talk about governments. What is the government journey? You have advised number of governments, continue to do so on the national AI agenda. You have defined national AI plans as a roadmap for the new critical infrastructure, propelling countries forward. Obviously, huge investments on behalf of the countries where public and private sector really connects very well. And now more than 50 countries have the great national AI plans and ready to go. Can you tell us a little bit about who is out front, and does it even matter, and what's going on in the national AI strategy?
Well, the public sector is definitely lagging the private sector in some respects, but it is hard to separate it out. In the United States, our AI economy is much more driven by the private sector, of course, and then as you go from the west, towards the east, this becomes less and less so, right? In Europe, it's I would say the private sector is being catalyzed by the public sector focus, and there's a lot more government involvement and support. And then as you move even further, obviously all the way to China, it's predominantly dominated by public sector spending, although there's certainly a lot of private sector activity as well. And so the government's lagging, but if you look forward and you see where the world's going, I mean, it basically the future of governance is no different than the future of business. I mean, it's going to be software defined, right? It's going to be smart, it's going to be connected, it's going to be software defined, and that's going to require all the same infrastructure, all the same software, all the same capabilities, and all the same risks that we've been talking about. Sylvain was just talking about recommender systems, for example. Recommender systems and the neural networks behind them, they are the new search engine, right? I mean, it used to be you go into a window and you type what you want, and that's still a big part of our human experience. But increasingly, these recommender engines we built into every aspect of our lives, include not just what lotion to pick and what pants to put on, but also, very important government decisions are as well, and policy decisions will be influenced by these recommender engines. And so this is, and those engines are learning. Those are, you talk about lifelong. These are the learning system. They are the neural networks behind them. So that is a pervasive trend. So across the world, frankly, the government spent the last couple of years rolling out these national AI plans, and there's 50, 60, 70 of them now. And so now we're kind of moving into this next phase, essentially, of implementation. And what are countries going to do to actually take those plans and go from talking about policy to implementing AI at scale at a national level? And there's not enough time to cover all of it. But what I would just say, Mark, is that it does matter, of course. I mean, of course it does matter. I mean, the countries need to stay competitive to compete on a global scale. And frankly, from an investor perspective, from that perspective, you're going to want to invest not just in companies, but in companies that are in countries that are making the right investments, that have the infrastructure. And again, everyone has access to the public cloud. So that's a sort of an omnipresent, sort of level of innovation. But on top of that, some countries are going further, and they're investing in domestic AI infrastructure dedicated to startups, for example. In fact, South Korea has a ministry for startups, which is really unusual, and they're building a complete a data center and supercomputer just to support local startups. So you're going to start to see more and more of that, and I think that's going to be one of the magnets of sort of AI ecosystems around the world, is having actual supercomputers at the center of these ecosystems, which is not something you see quite yet. So there's lots of trends, not enough time, but it is playing out on both levels.
Thank you, Keith, for giving us that vision, that view of what's really going on at the national AI level. And what we could tell is there's a lot going on. It's critically important. We will have a number of roundtables in this area, and we'll invite some participants to be part of our roundtables and discussions and the work that Keith is involved every day. We now go again to Tom. And as Keith was mentioning, well, you have all this infrastructure, and you have the importance of the strategy on adoption and critical infrastructure in place, whether it's governments or at the enterprise level. But you need data. And now what you're seeing also, Tom, in healthcare, in the area which you are extremely familiar with, especially in 2020 because of the COVID-19, that we are experiencing healthcare data tsunami. It really is hitting us from all directions. We can't get away with it. Our kids are consuming everything on TikTok and all of the data, monitoring, measuring us every day from devices. So is this because of this data tsunami, could be a perfect time for adoption? You say that, also say about the future of AI-human partnership and AI-powered world, has a lot to do with this data push. What does all of this mean when we talk about the future of AI-human partnership, AI-powered world, and data tsunami? Can you define it a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's stay with healthcare, which is my field of expertise. So first of all, anyone who understands AI knows AI to actually run and do good needs, feeds, and thrives on data. So there's one study in healthcare that says in 2020, medical knowledge is doubling every 73 days. So think about that for a second, to your point, Mark. So I can be the best trained physician, top of my class coming out of medical school, and the best residency going into a specialty area, knowing that a couple of months from now, there'll be twice as much information to deal with. How do humans possibly contend with all of that? I'm an advisor to a lot of organizations who wring their hands and treat the data tsunami as a problem. I see it as a huge opportunity. We have the ability to take these AI tools, the infrastructure that Keith and others have talked about, and put it in the hands of talented clinicians to be able to use things like natural language processing to go through thousands of pages of information in an EMR to find the best diagnosis, or researchers. Or we have the ability to take intelligence and stitch it into diagnostic images to dramatically fast forward the good work that radiologists and others do. And then I'd finally say, I'm asked to give a lot of presentations and virtual events to keynote talking about artificial intelligence. I've never been asked to do a keynote on creating a modern data estate, which is fundamental to driving any change at scale with AI. It comes back to some of what Keith and others were talking about, where if you're looking at how to truly drive healthcare, start with the data tsunami, treat that as a good thing, and then back in from there, where looking at how to invest, how to help build that data infrastructure, a modern data estate, is truly it's foundational. It's the base of the Maslow triangle for doing AI at scale.
Thank you, Tom. And with this in mind, I want to go now to my excellent co-hosts and colleagues, and for them to ask a question related to COVID-19 and also the technologies that are exploding now in different industries and different markets. So right now, I'd like to go to Angelica so she could ask a question of our talented and distinguished panelists. And then we go to Angelina, and then I'll be back for a final question to each one of you, and we'll end it with a bang. Okay, go ahead, Angelica.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, so far for all of your excellent words and input. I'm just going to do a round robin. I have a general question. We'll go through all the panelists, starting with Katia. So Katia, what do you think has been the biggest barrier to faster digital transformation until now, of course? And has anything really changed? What are some ways in which this whole coronavirus is forcing specifically positive changes? So I take it on to you to answer this question.
Yes, thank you, Angelica. Obviously, it's been a huge challenge for humanity, for the world, for business. As we speak, Levi, Strauss and company does have stores closed in Europe because of lockdown 2.0. On the other hand, any crisis is an opportunity, and it has really driven all companies to accelerate their digital transformation. So when things are going really well, it's hard to motivate people to change. But when we all have to overnight dramatically change the ways in which we work and operate and even think, it's not even an option anymore. So it has been a positive change. And I never thought that I would be quoting Lenin. I grew up with Lenin quotes in a communist country, but it is a quote that has become popular these times, and it is, there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are days when decades happen. And that's the time in which we're living now with COVID and with teaching everyone in the world to be digital for those who are not born digital, like you, Angelica. It's a great opportunity for the world to certainly use technology more, but also to become more human, to understand that we can all work from anywhere, that children have a place in the workplace, that pets can be allowed in podcasts. So I use this opportunity to, certainly I'm a big believer in technology and data and artificial intelligence, but I also want us to think about the human aspect of all of this and the responsibility that we all have as experts in this field to humanize this field and to make it more accessible, because it's humans that will use it and make it even better for us.
Excellent. Yes, Katia, you're one of the true champions of human-centric AI, and we always love hearing your input, and especially this field and domain. And now I'd like to move on to Sylvain and ask you the same question as well from BCG. What do you think is the biggest barrier to, this digital transformation until now with coronavirus, and what positive changes have you experienced and seen in your domain and your area of expertise? So Sylvain, on to you.
I feel what has been the unlock with COVID is there was no option. Like, companies could not use the traditional forecast system based on last year's sales and, with sort of baseline and trend line. So everyone was lost. So basically there was a bit no choice between either doing things by hand or using AI to very quickly compute very fresh data, mass amount of fresh data to try to make some sort of sense out of the environment. And I feel this has been the major unlock, and we are seeing, a massive use of high frequency external data for banks, for, in fashion and apparel, in industry, to try to sense the environment, to ingest this into, big, AI engines and, support decision making on, what do I do with my network, my staff, my digital advertising and all these things. And I think there's a massive unlock, and we also see that companies who are the most advanced with AI and digital are riding the crisis much better than others. And the gap in financial performance, stock market, and also operational performance has been widening since COVID. They went much less down during the peak of the confinement in Q2, and they are much, much more up. So to me, that's one thing. And the collective challenge, I would really build upon what Katia has been saying. Pre-COVID, you would survey people in companies. 1/3 will tell you, in 5 years, my job is gone because, of AI. 1/3 of the people would tell you, my job will still be there, but I will be gone because I don't understand AI and I will become unusable and useless. And this means 2/3 of the people, when we are getting exciting about, AI is accelerating, right, new world technology and all that, 2/3 of the people in companies feel, okay, this means game over for me. And here we have a massive responsibility to be inclusive, to train, to educate. And when we surveyed those people, funnily enough, vast majority of people in the US were feeling, my company has to get me trained. And the vast majority of the Europeans would say, my government has to find a way to train me. So accountability might be in different places. But all in all, we cannot accelerate with AI if it means 2/3 of the people feel it's game over for them. And there is a sort of a societal responsibility we all have in companies to make sure that, we reconcile, our teams and the workers with the rise of AI by educating, teaching, showing, and helping them tame the new dragon, which they see with AI.
Excellent. Thank you, Sylvain. So far we've covered human-centric AI. We've covered the fact that there is the skills gap and that it's a huge responsibility both on governments and enterprises to educate individuals so that they can succeed in this new digital world and not fear automation. So I want to take it over to Keith at NVIDIA and also ask you the same question. What challenges are we experiencing with the digital divide, and what also positive impacts have you seen in your domain and in your industry? Keith, on to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real divide. The digital divide is as good a term as any, but it's really, I call it, it's really a compute divide. And actually, interestingly enough, there was just an article released, a white paper last weekend by some researchers in the US, and it was all on this thing called the compute divide, which is the fact that the world's, all the innovations we're excited about, these incredibly complex models that are behind things like, Siri and Alexa and self-driving cars and these recommender engines at the middle of a lot of great consumer experiences, they have to be developed somewhere. And they're based both on private sector investment, as well as, frankly, open source contributions from big tech companies who that plays a big role. And those systems have to be built, increasingly on these really large machines that only sit today at the biggest tech companies and at big universities. And it's very hard for everyone else to get access to those machines or to afford the time on those machines, even in the cloud. So the cost of building the world's most complex models and training those models is starting to create sort of the haves and the have-nots. So I know there's different ways of characterizing that issue, who's got broadband access, who's got that, but this is kind of the new version of that, the new flavor of that divide, and it's material. And you have it even at the country level. I mean, there's this list called the Top 500, which lists the 500 fastest computers in the world, but only 30 countries have one machine on that list. So there's 150 other countries that are not in the top 500. So they don't have a system that's big enough to create the kind of models and frankly to win prizes. I mean, you can't win a Nobel Prize today, in science if you don't have access to a supercomputer. So if your country doesn't have one, then if you're not part of some consortium, you're out of luck, right? And so this is, this is just it's just one new sort of flavor of the inequity. But I think that's also why democratizing access, both through the public cloud and through domestic investments, is so important. And frankly, the investors will play a role in that, because if they companies towards these these ecosystems that are better that have better infrastructure, they'll move faster, quite frankly. And I think that's what I think in some sectors you're going to find that instead of strategic, actually this is a great example of this. Instead of strategic investment in the form of cash, you're going to see strategic investment in the form of access to compute. And we've already seen this, when Microsoft, and my colleague here is from Microsoft, committed $1 billion to the OpenAI Forum. The vast majority of that is for compute. I mean, that is to support the development of OpenAI's models. It's not just cash, it's actual access to computing. And that's the one thing OpenAI needed to create their innovation. So I think you're going to see more and more of that over time.
Excellent, Keith. Absolutely. Addressing this whole inequity and the problem with access to these systems is one of the biggest areas of our digital divide right now. And I would also like to ask this question to Tom over at Microsoft. I know, of course, there's a big digital divide when it comes to digital health implementations. And of course, it would be incredible to get your take on what are the challenges and also what are some of the positive impacts that came out of the coronavirus. So Tom, on to you.
Thank you. So when it comes to challenges, I mean, there have been many, many challenges faced by all, particularly the frontline providers. We've learned a number of things. When it comes to healthcare and COVID, we've learned two things that I think are very positive. One, agile transformation in healthcare is possible. When you think about it, telehealth has been around for decades. And all of a sudden, when we were faced with the crisis, we pulled that forward. I'm on the board of a major hospital in the Northwest. They went from practically no virtual visits to between March and today, they've done over 70,000 virtual visits with one hospital. So we've proven agile transformation in healthcare actually can work. The second thing we've proven is AI actually does work to drive measurable value, and doing so on a short timeline. So some things I think about are things like at Microsoft, we created a coronavirus health bot. We made that freely available. We had groups like Centers for Disease Control, hospitals around the world pick it up, use it. It literally fielded millions of inquiries from consumers to do symptom triaging and then getting to the point of making some recommendations on what to do next. Imagine if that workload alone had been left to humans around the world, what would happen? But we're seeing a number of things, but transformation on an agile basis actually can happen. AI works on a measurable basis at scale.
Excellent, Tom. Thank you for these insights in healthcare. And now, Angelina, we pass it on to you to address Alan with a question that you have as well. So, Angelina, take it away.
Angelica, so I would like to take it back to the initial question that Mark had about the post-COVID-19 world and the expectations we can have in this regard. So my question for Alan would be, in your opinion, what are the industries that stand to benefit the most from AI technologies in the post-COVID-19 world? And if you can maybe share your perspective on what parts of companies' activities, such as sales, manufacturing, etc., will see the fastest adoption of AI technologies. I'll take it on to you.
Well, you know, I think every industry has the opportunity to be a fast mover here. The challenge with large corporations in general is that they're slow. They're very slow. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of internal dynamics that cause a lot of things not to happen. Corporations are set up to do incremental advancements. They do not handle step change very well. And when you have a step change technology such as AI and ML and others, 5G coming as well, it's hard for people to understand and envision what the world's going to look like, because people have a certain way of working and they're stuck in that way of working. And there's just islands of pockets of people, whether they be data scientists or marketing or other people that are visionaries that can see the future. And it's very difficult. So there certainly is the low-hanging fruit, which tends to be those things that are repetitive actions, and we've seen RPA do very well there, although we haven't really seen many times the value of RPA. When we start talking about those things that are going to create new business models, those are much more difficult because you have so many antiviruses come out every place you turn. People come out to try to kill those things because they're afraid of what it means for them. So I think that there is a huge opportunity here. This is as much an emotional change, step change, as a technical change. I can see applying it in our industry in every aspect. The question is, where are you going to get the best ROI? But more importantly, the question is, where are you going to get the least resistance to the change? Because it takes building champions and building a support mechanism bottom up in order to be able to drive this through. This isn't something that you can do top down.
Thank you so much for this answer. It was really insightful. And I would like to circle it back to Mark for the final thoughts. Mark, you're on mute. We don't hear you. I think you're on mute, Mark.
Mark.
I'm mute. Okay, here I am. Okay, all live in person and in the quiet part of New Jersey, and I'm not on mute. I'm loud and have a lot of comments and interesting thoughts, but we are almost down to the end. The host is giving us 5 minutes to wind down, and I have one question to each one of you. It will be a separate question, and then we'll do a closing, and we finish this amazing panel. We could go on for hours and hours, but I think that we covered so much ground. Alan, I'll start with you again. What are the most interesting startups, ideas, ventures that have impacted or impacting AI digital transformation? You sit on a lot of boards, involved in a lot of innovation and startups and programs. Give us an idea what investors should be looking for to invest and what's going to create impact today, 2020, and down the line.
I mean, I'm very much have been a proponent of edge computing for a number of years. I think we're seeing more and more AI move out to the edge. We still have latency issues. 5G will help. It's not going to resolve that. But I'm a big fan of edge computing, AI on the edge, and I think that's the future in the next immediate future, and also in the longer term future. And edge you can define many different ways, anything from vehicles to stores to surfboards to whatever you might want. But it is certainly I see everything moving out to the edge in a much more rapid manner than we've seen before.
Thank you very much, Alan. I want to go to Katia now. Katia, you have an interesting title, a very unique one now. Hopefully this will spread throughout the industry, Chief AI and Strategy Officer, but Chief AI Officer is really important. Why is that important to have a Chief AI Officer to drive global digital business strategy and transformation for growth, expansion, investments? Why is it critically important, and why do we need to have that?
Well, it's important to have a single point of accountability. It's important to have ownership. It's important to have someone who can lead the organization, mobilize it, create followers and advocates, show the value. I have this motto of think big, start small, scale fast, and show very tangible results, again, centered around the consumer first, always starting with the consumer, then the internal operations of the company, and then potentially new revenue models. But I also want to be very clear, AI, or transformation for that matter, is a team sport. It is important to have someone who can have the ownership, but it is impossible to drive this without full support of the entire organization, the entire leadership of the company, but as Alan pointed out, throughout the company as well. Bottom up, top down, up, down, and sideways, the whole company. And what's beautiful about this is that it really can be. So as part of how to make it concrete, I also wanted to make sure how we turn a challenge like COVID into an opportunity. So in the past year, when our stores were closed, we actually grew our e-commerce by more than 50%, which is a huge opportunity. But more importantly, we also thought about our consumers again. And as people are looking to exercise during lockdown, they're getting more active on their bikes. So you will see me wearing the Levi Smart Tracker. We are now in the age of not just smart cities and smart and connected devices, but also connected bodies. And in this smart tracker, which we've done in a collaboration with Google, you can actually use that while you're biking. You can listen to music, you can take a phone call safely, and you are always connected if you'd like to be. So that's just an example of how you can take an iconic 167-year-old company and apply machine learning in a very human-centric way.
Katia, thank you very much. And this is obviously you're very much an inspiration, and you're giving us ideas of what people should be looking for the future. This whole world of connected universe, connected devices that is in front of us in our homes, in our enterprises, everywhere. That's our future. And with this, I want to go to Keith. Keith, to continue this discussion, you and I spoke many times. What are some of your thoughts about the companies, unicorns, and startups that investors should be looking at? Obviously, I know you're going to say Nvidia, but Nvidia doesn't need much introduction. But maybe there's some other thoughts that you could provide to us.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to say Nvidia because our earnings come out after close of business today. So I won't be talking about Nvidia. No, listen, I mean, it's you opened up, Mark, with some interesting insight about investments and, where the money is going. The other part of that narrative is that investments in AI startups are down about 10 to 20%, because of COVID. The overall volume, the actual deal flow has pulled back a little bit. So I think, but that may not be a terrible thing. I mean, the truth is a lot of companies last year who called themselves AI ventures were not AI ventures. And they were, there's a lot of hype. I think that where I see, frankly, across the network, look, NVIDIA has a network called Inception, which is a network of about 6,000 startups, and we track them quite closely, and we see who's getting investment, who's not. And there are some companies on the picks and axes side, sort of the infrastructure, like companies that help actually with machine learning model management and that kind of stuff. But I'd say the vast majority of real big deals and funding is going to companies at the intersection of industry and AI that have real solutions and solve real problems that also leverage machine learning on top of that. It's not just about AI, it's about solving something specific, like Beyond Limits, which is a company that just raised over 100 million, focusing on oil and gas and energy issues and that kind of thing. So whether it's healthcare or retail or energy or the auto sector, I think where there's a really strong management team that comes with a lot of domain expertise, and they're leveraging machine learning or computer vision or NLP to solve a very specific problem, in that industry. We're seeing a lot bigger investments go in that area, and that's where I think you're going to see a lot more play. And the number one reason, going back to Sylvan's survey earlier, is the vast majority of established legacy companies are struggling to actually implement this at scale. They just don't have the digital DNA. They don't have the culture or the system to do it. So a smaller company with a deep domain expertise in an area is more likely to be successful and frankly more likely to get acquired because of that expertise. So that's what I see from an investment perspective.
Thank you very much. And we're just final two thoughts, and then we're winding down. We want to get thought from Tom, Lawry on, and then we go to Sylvain to kind of end it on a very high note about AI-powered enterprises and where we're going. So right now, sticking with Microsoft and Tom, we spoke about the tsunami. We spoke about the AI-human partnership of machines. Let's look into the future. Microsoft is focusing on social innovation. It's focusing on areas like mind-computer interfaces, intelligent testing, biohacking. What should investors focus on from your perspective and Microsoft perspective?
Well, again, healthcare related, I would say on the short term, which is the next couple of years, anything that's going to make the current processes better. So with that, I've got a new book where, I talk about the move from traditional health to intelligent health systems. Intelligent health systems are those that make pervasive use of AI across all channels, touch points, and experiences. So looking for organizations that get that and do that in healthcare is a great example. Beyond that, longer term, everything you just talked about when it comes to some of those bigger long-term ideas have great upside both for the long-term in healthcare and other places. I mean, specifically today, there's a group called Class KLAS. They're the top HIT analysts. They just came out with a report. So some of the best small companies right now that they rate are groups like Kensai, Javion, Health Catalyst. On patient engagement, just to wrap up, we in healthcare could clearly use some lessons from people like Katia and Frank when it comes to what retail is doing to improve the consumer experience. Anyone that's going to do that using AI in healthcare deserves a close look.
Thank you very much, Tom. I know there's a lot to talk about. Microsoft is involved a lot of places, including a Microsoft venture fund. But with this, I want to end it on a very high note. And I want to go to Sylvain to really talk about this post-COVID world, this enterprises that are transforming themselves into the human-powered AI companies. Really, humans are now being elevated to do higher value tasks to benefit society, organizations, obviously career progression and everything. And according to the Business 20 digital education, we are now seeing the rise of AI-powered companies in the post-crisis world. And hopefully this is a good thing for everybody. So Sylvain, to end it on a very high note. And before I do this, I want to say thanks to all distinguished panelists. Amazing job. And my great co-host that I have really worked this session very well to give an overall view about where we are in AI world. So with this in mind, we go to Sylvain and we end it on a very high note.
So thank you, Mark. And the AI-powered company for me is a company where AI is no longer for just an elite, but where everyone is touching, playing, working with AI. If not, of course, being an AI software designer, but knows how to do that. Very important. It's a company where AI is not trying to mimic what humans do and do it in an automated fashion. This is about leveraging massive amounts of data, external data that are not used today within companies, and massive amounts of data can be ingested and can be super relevant to solve business problems. But this is not about recreating insight and trying to mimic what humans do. Go for data native processes. Think what data are useful to solve, could be useful to solve a business problems. Competition will be a lot competitive advantage on what data you have that your competitors don't have, and what sort of processes you've put in place to gather data from consumers, from the environment. And lastly, I will quote Jack Ma on this one. I think the AI-powered company will be companies where the mindset has shifted, and it's no longer where could AI help humans, but where is the true value add of humans, and let the rest done by AI.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. Thank you very much, Sylvain. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Katia. Thank you, Tom and Alan, for the great participation and encouragement. Of course, my co-host Angelica and Angelina for moving this process forward and recording this session and making it all possible. And Danny for giving us an opportunity to lay the AI landscape to your family offices and investors in the United States and worldwide. We really enjoyed this moment. On behalf of my distinguished panelists and co-hosts, I'd like to thank you, Danny, and your organization, and we wish you the best with the rest of the conference today. Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you, Mark. It's our second panel after the Canadian conference, so it's been great. And we hope to see you all in person. With all due respect to Zoom and everything, we hope to see you in person. Nobody would jump in before the time. And you don't even know what I went here while you guys talked about AI, Mr. Minovich. I was the best internet in the United States, so Verizon say, was gone. And I'm using this phone of mine to lead this entire session, okay? But I'm doing it, you see I'm calm. You know, I'm dealing with the punches. So I want to go back to my conferences in person, if you don't mind.
Okay, we are coming to Dubai. We're coming to Dubai with the great session that you're bringing all of those families around the world. We're going to be there to support you and all the organizations. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, my good friend. Thank you, everybody here for joining.